Alright, so in this video we're going to be doing the section on substitutions, and really it's just a bunch of examples over stuff that we've really already gone over. Now if you're looking at the examples, you might see a bunch of X's and Y's and N's and A's and B's and H's and whatever, and think that it looks kind of complicated, but really every problem on here in this section tells you, well put in 2 for X and 3 for Y. And then once we make these substitutions, then really they look no different than any other problems that we should have seen in some of the other sections. And so we'll make those substitutions, and I'll go slow for the first couple just to see kind of how we make those substitutions. But really, after I make those substitutions, you should really be able to do these on your own. And I will be doing all the odd ones. I will leave you the even ones. And if you have any trouble or you're getting stuck, please come into the tutoring center for additional help. These problems that we're about to do are on page 13 of the study guide. All right, so let's get started with number 1. Number 1 says negative x squared times y. And then it says x equals 2 and y equals 3. And then it basically wants you to plug those in and simplify our answer. Well, if I know x equals 2, then I'm going to rewrite my equation, and it's going to be negative, and then in parentheses I'm going to put 2 squared, and then times, and y is 3, so we put I don't know why I just put a y again. Y is 3. And then so the order of operations, we do our 2 squared first, and we have negative 4, 2 times 2 is 4, times 3, and then we get negative 12, and that is in fact our answer. And so once we get down to this point right here, like I said, it becomes a fairly simple problem if we're comfortable with all the stuff that we've already gone over in the previous videos. The reason that I put a parentheses around my 2 is because the parentheses, there is no parentheses up here that include the negative. And so really, they don't write it, but there is a parentheses around this x right here. And I want to do that just to kind of clarify that I'm not going to include the negative in my squaring. Now, if I had just written it like this, if I had written it like this over here, negative 2 squared times 3, you should also be comfortable realizing that this negative here is not included in the squaring, and so you're going to get the same answer. So you don't have to put the parentheses down. I just did it for clarification. But usually when I substitute in something, I could even put a parentheses around this 3 right here. I like to put parentheses, especially if it's something bigger than just one number. In this case, it wouldn't have really made a difference. All right, so like I said, I'm going to do the odd problem. So I'm going to go on to number 3. And number 3 says x to the 4th over x to the 5th plus z. And then it tells us x is equal to 4 and z is equal to negative 5 over 4. Now before I make any substitutions, I'm going to simplify my problem first. Based on the exponents section, I'm going to take this part of the problem right here, and I'm going to say, well, I can take this number, and since they're both x's, I'm going to subtract this number, and I get x to the negative 1, right? Which, as we know, based on the video from exponent section, is the same thing as 1 over x to the 1, or just x. And then plus z. And so now that I rewrote, you don't have to rewrite it, but it makes it much simpler. Now I just have 1 over x plus z. If you wanted to plug in x at the very beginning, you could have 4 to the 4th power over 4 to the 5th power and work that out, and you know they'd be pretty big numbers, but you would end up getting the same answer at the end. So you could do it that way. The way I did it, based on our rules for exponents, makes it much simpler. And now that I have this simplified equation here, I'm going to plug in what we know. So I have 1 over, it says x is equal to 4, so 1 over 4, plus, and then z is negative 5 over 4, so negative 5 over 4. And then I can rewrite that as simply 1 over 4 minus 5 over 4. And then since they already give us the same denominator, if we work it out the way we did, and since we have the same denominator, I don't have to worry about finding a common denominator. And so I can just rewrite that as 1 minus 5 over 4, and then that's negative 4 over 4, and that's equal to negative 1. And then and negative 1 is our final answer for number 3. And so really, once again, once we substitute, or in this case we reduce or we simplify and then substitute, the problem in and of itself is really not too hard, and we get pretty simple answers, at least so far. So let's check out number 5. I'm going to kind of create a little barrier right here. All right, let's go over here. Number 5. Number 5 says x minus, and then the square root of y, and then plus the square root of x, and it looks like it's squared. It doesn't put the parentheses, but it's like that, it's squared. And then divided by, and then we have the square root of z, and then that z is to the 4th power. And then we're dividing that by z. And again, before I plug in any numbers, and I'll write down what our numbers are, but before I plug them in, I'm going to simplify. It makes it much easier. And so this over here says x is equal to 3, y is equal to 25, and z is equal to 2. All right, so simplifying. Well, on the top, I can't really simplify x, and I have minus. Well, I can't really do anything with the square root of y, so I'm going to leave that. But I can say that the square root of x squared is the same thing as x to the 2 over 2, which is just x to the, well, 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so x to the 1, or just x. So I can simplify it like so. Divided by, and then I have the square root of z to the 4th. And since the square root, since there's a 2 right there, and again there was a 2 right there, which is why we said it was 2 over 2, this would become z to the 4 over 2 divided by z. All right, and now I'm going to reduce that even further. I'm going to say, well, here I have an x plus an x, so that's 2x minus the square root of y over, and then I have z to the 4 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is simply 2. So this can look like this: z squared divided by z. And again, this would be z to the 1. And now if I take this number and I subtract this number, I get simply z to the 1, or z. And so my final simplified problem, before I plug in any numbers, would be 2x minus the square root of y divided by z. And again, you can plug in the numbers first. I'm not going to do that. It may or may not be more difficult. I don't think it'll be terribly difficult, but I do think the way I showed you here would be easier. Some people are more comfortable simplifying with letters, and some people are more comfortable simplifying with letters. If you do, or I'm sorry, with numbers. If you do simplify with the numbers, you're going to have to do a little bit more math. But again, that doesn't necessarily make it more difficult. But now that I have this simplified equation, I'm going to plug in the numbers that they give me. And so I'm going to say 2 times, and then they tell me that x is 3, so I'm going to put a 3 there, minus the square root of y, and they tell me y is 25, so the square root is 25, divided by, and then it's just a z on the bottom, so that's just divided by 2. And that's, let's see, we have 2 times 3 is 6, minus the square root of 25 is 5 over 2. And then 6 minus 5 is simply 1. So our answer is just 1 over 2. All right, let's go on to the next problem, the next odd problem. The next odd problem will be number 7. And number 7 looks fairly simple. Let's check this out. This says negative x cubed. That's it. And then it tells us that x is equal to negative 2. So we got to be careful with our negative signs here, but that's the only real trouble with this problem. Now, like I said previously, the negative is outside of the cubing, so I'm gonna ignore that. I'm gonna put negative, and then in parentheses I'm gonna put negative 2 cubed. And so now I'm actually, since x, they tell me x is equal to negative 2, I'm actually gonna cube negative 2. And if we think about what negative 2 cubed is, it's negative 2 times negative 2, and that's 4, times negative 2, that's negative 8. So now I have negative, and then in my parentheses I have negative 8. And then essentially this is what this is negative 1. And if I have negative 1 times negative 8, I just simply get a positive 8. And positive 8 is our final answer. Hopefully that wasn't too difficult. Again, once we get the substitution down, it's really not too difficult as far as the math goes. All right. Let's go on to number 9, my last odd problem. All right, number 9. So number 9 says x times y, let me put a little barrier right here, x times y minus 3 over the square root of y. And then it says x is equal to 1. I love when x is equal to 1. It makes things really easy. And y is equal to 4. All right, let's plug those in. So we simply have 1, and you don't need to put in the parentheses if you don't want to. 1 times 4 minus 3 divided by the square root, and y again is 4. So then we just have, well, 1 times 4 is simply 4 minus 3, and the square root of 4 we know is 2. So now, you know, it was fairly easy to get to this point, and what we're doing here is we're just adding fractions, or a whole number and a fraction. And so I'm going to put this 4 over a 1, and I'm going to say, well, I need a common denominator, so I'm going to multiply that by 2, multiply the top by 2, and then I get 8, 2 times 4 is 8, minus 3 over our common denominator of 2, and then our final answer is simply 5 over 2. And we're just going to leave it as a fraction because we're not going to use calculator. So our final answer for number 9 is 5 over 2. Some of the even problems, I didn't want to go through all the problems, it would take a while, but some of the even problems may look a little difficult. But really, again, once you plug in, once you substitute in the numbers that they give you, it shouldn't be any more difficult than any of the other problems that we've gone over in previous sections. And you know, a good challenge is always good for you. So try those out. Try out the even problems. Hopefully the odd ones made sense. And if you have any trouble, please come into the tutoring center. I'll see you there.